Hello again. Here I am back doing part two of the anxiety video, my anxiety story. Um, so, when this anxiety got to a certain point, by the grace of God, I was able to see my spiritual director, and I went in there. He's this old priest, Father. I'll call him Father D. So we go in there, and one of the things I wanted to make clear to him was, I said to him, Father, do you know what anxiety is? Like, do you know what I'm talking about? And he crossed his arms and looked at me. He's like, yes. Like he totally he knows. So I wanted to get that straight, that he knew what I meant. So anyway, the number one thing he told me was acceptance. You have to accept anxiety. You can't fight it. It's just going to make it worse. And I know this from experience, because it just makes you freak out more. So you have to accept it, which isn't easy, but you just have to, you have to be like, okay, here it is. It's coming. There's like, let it run through your body, because really anxiety, physical anxiety is a lot of adrenaline that's going through your body, and it's kind of just has to do its thing. And you can't, it's hard, but okay. So number one is acceptance. Okay. And then he gave me an analogy of a tugboat and a ship. So this little tugboat is our reason, and this big ship is like it's our emotions. So a tugboat can lead that little ship. A little tugboat can lead that big ship. Turn it around. It can do it, but it takes a lot of take it slow, and you got to it'll do it. But that's kind of how it is with us. We have the tugboat of the reasoning that wants to do the right thing, but the big ship of our emotions oftentimes takes over. So that was another analogy he gave me, the tugboat and the ship. So try to let that little tugboat do what it needs to do, your reasoning. Then he gave me an analogy of a submarine, and still don't quite get this, but the submarine, to prevent from being uh, water coming in, these walls come down. These walls shut down in a submarine to prevent it from being flooded. And those walls is our acceptance. So like that's what we're supposed to do when anxiety creeps in, like just accept it. And those walls will help you from that anxiety from flooding you with even more fear. And so his big thing was, we accept it. And he was very simple about it. He just kind of sat there listening to me, and I was writing things down. And so those are some of the things he told me. But one big thing that really, really helped me a lot was, okay, so when this anxiety started, this physical anxiety, back when it first started, I developed a fear of going to the store, but I was able to nip that in the bud right away, because like that episode at Walmart that I mentioned in the one video, when I forced myself to get that gallon of milk, it sounds silly, but it took a lot of effort. And I was like, I'm not going to be that kind of person that's never going to go to the store again. I heard stories of people that would not even leave their homes. When the anxiety first started, I did all this research and learned about what panic attacks were, and all kinds of stories about anxiety. And I was like, I do not want to be that person that doesn't do stuff anymore because I'm scared. But the one thing that really was hard for me was driving, because I have a lot of kids, and I had this big blue van, and a Sprinter van actually. And it's a big van, and I had to drive this, and we were doing this co-op for homeschooling at our church, and it was almost an hour away, well, about 45 minutes away. And that's when a lot of times the anxiety would just creep in, and I would be so afraid of blacking out, crashing with all the kids in the car. Because with anxiety, you get a lot of like weirdness in the head, and your heart starts beating. You get in your chest, you get in your head, and it's very hard. It's very scary. And so I came up with all these scenarios, like, oh my goodness, what if I crash? What if I black out? What if? So when I saw the priest, Father D, I kept saying what if a lot. And finally he looks at me and goes, no what ifs. No what ifs. and and it was funny, because that is the one thing that I wrote down in capital letters, no what ifs. And that was actually one of the big things I had to tell myself, and that helped me later on to get over anxiety. And so Um, so the funny thing is, and he also gave me and my husband a blessing before we left, and I'm sure that helped too, of course. But the funny thing is, I remember thinking to myself, wouldn't it be funny, like if Paul got sick this weekend and I had to drive all the kids to mass by myself on Sunday? Like, imagine if that happened, like, right after all this advice the priest gave me. Well, that happened that weekend. I think it was like that weekend. My husband was sick, and I was like, oh man, I have to drive the kids to mass by myself. But I told myself, I was like, okay, no what ifs, no what ifs. And to sum it up, I was able to drive to mass and back, and I did fine. And I felt really happy about that. I was like, yes, like no what ifs. And we all survived and we came home in one piece. So I used that a lot because I really just had one session with this priest. He had been my spiritual director for many years, but for the anxiety, this is what I only sat down for, like one session with my husband and father, with Father D. Okay, so that's basically, I know it sounds very simple, but that's basically what you've got to do. What the things I mentioned above, you just have to accept. You have to accept it. And one of the fears that I had developed was when we went to mass. I hated being in the middle of a pew. I felt trapped and scared, and I didn't like sitting in the front of the church. It really freaked me out. Like I had to sit in the back for a long time. And some of my friends that have anxiety, they have the opposite. They have to sit in the front, not the back. What was another thing? I didn't like being in crowds. I hated standing in line, like staying still. There are all kinds of things that were triggers, but driving was one of them. But I had to just get over that because I couldn't like not drive my kids. I had to get over that. And I also want to say my dad helped me a lot. He's a doctor. He's a very good Catholic, and he just helped me so much. And my mom and my family and my friends, and I would like to also, like Katie and Chris Fifelski, I thank you so much for all your advice, and Alice, and I want to thank my good friends and family that supported me during this time. One thing that really also I want to mention, that this one image in my mind that really helped me when I was going through anxiety, because this lasted about 3 years. It took me about 3 years to get over this, but the image of Jesus helping Peter when he was sinking into the water. And remember, Peter was first running on the water. He couldn't wait to go to Jesus, and then once he realized he was on the water, he realized he was sinking. And it disappointed our Lord because he wanted Peter to trust in him. Well, and Peter's holding his hand, like he's holding his hand really tight, and so he wouldn't sink. And that was like a deep, that whole image hit me very deeply. And then even like now it's kind of funny because now that I don't really get anxiety anymore, I sometimes forget about that image, but I should always remember that it was meant a lot to me, because there was one instance when I was with the kids, and again, this happened at Mass. I had to go alone with the kids. This is like right after my anxiety first started, and I was at Mass with the kids. All of a sudden, during the epistle, I just felt like, oh my goodness, I felt like I was going to pass out, or again, kind of like I was going to die. And I went to the back of the church, and I was very nervous because my kids had to be by themselves in the pew. And what freaked me out was that my husband wasn't there. And I thought, if I die, who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to drive them home? What's going to happen? I had like a really bad panic attack during Mass. And I remember thinking at communion time, because we receive our Lord in Holy Communion, his body, blood, soul, and divinity. And I knew like I needed God so badly. And I forced myself to walk up that aisle. And this was a big church. This happened to be a big church with lots of pews. And I remember like gripping on to every pew as I was going up the aisle to receive our Lord. And that, it's kind of like, that analogy of gripping onto our Lord's hand with every pew, gripping onto him. And sure enough, after Holy Communion, I was fine. I was able to drive home. But that's something that I always remember because it was very scary for me. But I remember thinking how important it was that I receive our Lord. And he helped me. So there was this I guess she's still alive, I assume. Her name's Lucinda Bassett. And I guess a lot of people know about her books on anxiety. And she's one of the people that, I would listen to her videos. And the funny thing is a lot of her videos is pretty much what the priest told me, about, accepting your fears. And so it's just funny that, this priest, I guess priests get classes in psychology too, But so one of the things I do also when I would get a panic attack is when I would feel the anxiety coming on, I would start to sing or just do something to keep busy. One thing that really helped me actually was like when you're feeling anxiety, you just don't feel like doing anything except you don't feel like doing anything. You just want to kind of like deal with the fear. But one thing I realized was baking. Like I would just suddenly like pull out stuff and start baking. And I realized that that would help me a lot to just, because it made me focus on other things. When you're focused on something, it really helps. And also exercise, like I would run out into the yard and just, we had these hills in our old backyard and I would just run up and get my heart racing, and that helped me. And, I walked on my treadmill a lot, and that helped. And also I realized I wasn't eating right. Well, I knew I wasn't eating right. I was overweight, and I had to eat healthier. So that helped. The diet helps. And I think also my anxiety was probably triggered from, I probably had something hormonal going on too. And also they say that sometimes anxiety is triggered by something traumatic happening in your life. And as I mentioned in another video, my dear sister, the saint, her baby had died at 2 months. And that was super dramatic because that's like the first funeral my family had. I'm one of 8 kids. I'm the oldest, and there hasn't been like my parents are still alive. My brothers and sisters are still alive. None of the nieces and nephews had ever died except this dear little baby. So that my anxiety disorder actually began that year that baby Bella died. And I had a baby that was around Bella's age. So I think that kind of psychologically had an impact on like triggering this whole, anxiety thing. So sometimes an anxiety disorder is triggered by some traumatic things that happen in your life. And, so I don't know what else to say except those are the things that help me. And I'm looking at my notes here. One time, this dear priest, Father de Guzman, he recommended this book to me. It's probably looking backwards in the video, but it's called Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence. It's going to look backwards, but Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence, The Secret of Peace and Happiness. So when I was going through anxiety, this book helped me a lot. And this is what the priest recommended to me. God lets these sufferings happen in your life for a reason. Like God doesn't send us suffering for nothing. He brings it to bring us closer to him. Because, to be honest, if I had never had scruples, if I had never had anxiety, I probably wouldn't have been praying as much as I do now, or feeling that how much I depend on God. And I still forget that sometimes, I need to be reminded, but when I was going through anxiety and, real intensely, oh man, I just was praying a lot and realizing like, God, I need you. I can't do this alone. And it really helped to bring me closer to him, and also to realize what's important in life. And, you don't sweat the small stuff as much as I was, realizing how much I needed God. So, I'm trying to think of anything else that would be, so I just kept doing that. Oh, and then one thing, and this is something I mentioned in another video too, was that the advice that Father D gave me for scruples, I used it all the time. Like I pulled it out all the time for the anxiety. And again, I'll just say it one more time. And it's stop being afraid of being afraid. Accept your fears and they will diminish. Courage is to do the right thing even though you feel fear. Be humble about your fears and don't get into them, or they will imprison you in yourself and make you feel crazy. And that I wrote it down. I said it all the time. And I was like, I really looked at every single word and made it stop being afraid of being afraid. And that's one thing about anxiety is I would always be afraid of oh no, what if I get afraid? What if I'm shopping at the store and I'm suddenly become afraid? What if I'm driving and I suddenly become afraid? But Well, it's like stopping afraid of being afraid. Accept your fears and they will diminish. Courage is to do the right thing, even though you feel fear, so, and be humble about your fears. Like, again, humility is truth. Like, okay, the truth is I'm getting fears. Like, who doesn't? Life is we all have our fears, so accept them. Be humble about your fears and don't get into them, or they will imprison you in yourself and make you feel crazy. So that, I cannot tell you that, just like a one little paragraph, it was like such a lifesaver. Yeah, that's about it. So, oh, one other thing, big thing. So when I had that session with Father D, that one session, he told me, he said, trust in God like you trust in your husband. And I was like, oh, that's easy. Like, I trust my husband. I love my husband and he's so good to me. And so I need to trust in God like I trust in my husband. And that helps a lot. So I hope this helps you. And I pretty much, just like if you're alone out there and you feel sometimes, also you might feel like people don't understand. Sometimes people just don't understand because people have different temperaments. I remember one family member, well, couple, I just got the feeling like they just totally didn't get it. And it was embarrassing, but that's the way it is. Not everyone's going to understand you, but God does. So bring your troubles to God, and of course, bring your troubles to God's Mother Mary. He gave her to be our mother, and she's there for us. And so I hope this helps. Okay, bye.